we have to create a platform for our players. We can't really copycat what works someplace else because there's other clubs that are working very well. I think now the next phase is maybe trying to accelerate that 16, 17-year-old player into MLS readiness by 18 instead of 19 or 20. I think that's the goal for the club, and a lot of our investment is trying to align all of these platforms so that we can do that.
Hello and welcome to 1v1 Advancing Soccer Talent presented by Audi. I'm your host, Calen Carr, and I am pleased to be joined today by Academy Director for FC Dallas, Chris Hayden. Chris, how are you doing?
Just great. Just happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, look, we know this is unprecedented times. Of course, difficult during this pandemic. You're disconnected in some ways from your team. How have you been able to address this challenging time with your young academy players, and maybe what are some of the things you're learning from this?
Yeah, well, we've been with our players, many of them for multiple years. I mean, a lot of our kids have been in the academy for 4 or 5 years, so we know them very well. And because our program allows them to train every day, Monday through Friday, when this crisis came, it was obviously odd territory for us because very rarely do we not see our kids 2 days in a row. And I think we're going on 2 months now with them being sort of quarantined at home. And so it's created some real challenges for us. I think maybe even more difficult for the players themselves. We've been interacting with our players daily pretty much. We've got kids from under 12 through under 19 that are in our academy, and we're handling them slightly differently. But our younger players and our older players are involved in online meetings daily with staff, not just head coaches, but support staff, training staff, performance staff, goalkeeper coaches, listening to guests. We brought people into some of these web meetings that we've had so that we could give some insight. We've had first team players on interacting with our teams and players. We've given them projects. So I think we've tried to tackle this a bunch of different directions.
A word I hear around FC Dallas a lot is philosophy. What is the philosophy of FC Dallas as it relates to the academy?
Yeah, well, we've had this exercise internally about what ingredients do we want players to have to be ready for the first team. And it's very difficult to sort of create that environment that gets a player ready for the first team because none of the players coming through our academy are ready for the first team. What they really have to have is experience in the first team. And so it's sort of the chicken or the egg. Do we not play young players because they're not ready, or are they not ready because we don't play them? And I think we've had a lot of discussion about that internally, and most of the key members of our staff from ownership down believe that players will be ready if given the opportunity. So, I think that is the philosophy we have and the most important ingredient that we offer. And I won't say it's the easiest ingredient to have because you do have to have talent. You do have to develop talent, but you also have to align all of those key stakeholders. And if you look at our first team staff, Lucci was an academy director and heavily involved in our academy for 6 years prior to being named the head coach. But even our assistant coaches, Peter Lucine and Mikey Varas, both were head coaches in our academy. It's not just an ascension of young players into our first team, but it's also the belief in young coaches and coaches moving from the youth ranks into the first team. And I think, to be honest, the hiring of those staffs and those people make it much easier for us to believe in our players because they know them and they've seen them and they've watched them grow up. And those players want to play for those coaches like they have in the past, just on a different and a higher platform. It's not so much what we're teaching, it's what the opportunity teaches them. And so I think part of our philosophy is putting them in these types of scenarios and situations where they are forced to make decisions and then be accountable for those decisions and then reflect on them and make better choices. And I don't think that's something that you can get to, a person or a player that's making better choices without many opportunities to make mistakes.
You're the perfect person to talk to because you've been involved with the club for so long in a number of different roles. When you look at the evolution specifically of the academy and to now where it really is seen as one of the best academies in all of North America, how have you seen this process take shape? And could you have ever imagined that it would have gotten to where it is now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember the early days in the academy. We launched in 2008, and I remember when we announced our first academy teams, and this was a new platform for us. There was really no bridge between what was our youth club and what was the first team. And so as we discussed player pathways and kids emerging and at some point getting signed to pro contracts, it was sort of just an idea. There weren't clear examples. And I remember sitting in living rooms with families or in our complex talking to families about what we would want to have happen if kids were in our academy that were talented enough that we would sign them to a contract. And I remember some of the questions that would be returned, like, give me an example of someone that's done that. And the answer was nobody. No one had signed a domestic professional contract through an MLS club or any club for that matter. And so it was very difficult for us to get families to understand. And obviously, college was a really important platform and still is a very important platform. Many of our players will end up playing in college, but the program is designed for kids to get into the first team. And now, fast forward 10, 12 years, we've signed 28 players to the first team. Almost half of our roster has come through our academy. And many of those players are prominent, are playing important roles in the first team. And I think now it's very easy for a kid to visualize, what it looks like, what that pathway looks like. He's not having to dream about it. He knows the player that was signed before him. He knows his history. He knows what teams he played on and what platform he was in. So it's much easier. We don't have to really try to describe that process. We're living it out literally daily. And I think that has led to more belief. And the belief that our kids have now, I think, is the most important ingredient. It's more important than, any of our methodology or anything that our staff could give them. It's just the idea that if I'm good enough, the club will believe in me and invest in me.
You've had a lot of success stories coming through the academy. Weston McKennie now starring with the U.S. men's national team and Schalke in Germany. Calen Carr had a big role with the club. And then you look all around and you see Paxton Pomykal now and all these guys coming through like Ricardo Pepi. How do you manage the expectations of these guys? What have you learned from some that have gone abroad, some that have aspirations to, like Reggie Cannon? And how do you see that as a part of this broader pathway where it can be maybe a win for the club, but also for the individual player and their goals?
Yeah, well, obviously you mentioned national team. I think the national team is a really important part of the process for our kids, for them to get that experience, that international experience. It's part of our plan, even with our teams, that they're playing against top competition all the time. Of course, domestic competition, but also against the world's best. So the more we can put them in that scenario, the better. And the more we know about them, the better we can evaluate their development and their progress. A lot of them have aspirations to do all of those things. They want to play in the World Cup. They want to play in Champions League. Some of them aspire to play in Europe in top clubs. All of them aspire to play in MLS and also debut and play in our first team and play a prominent role. So I think all along the way, these are sort of milestones for these kids. How do we help them? I think these examples of players that have come before them really do crystallize for them the opportunity. We had a young player, Chris Richards, who was in our academy for a year, and he's now at Bayern Munich playing in the second team there and is very connected to our club, even with a short stint. He played for a brief stint in Houston with our USL coach, Eric Quill, who sort of sent him to Dallas to us. But he's a great story because he's a kid that really never played in our first team, but he's trying to break through with one of the world's top clubs. And, that's an example that young player could use in our academy to say, look what's possible, in a year with FC Dallas or a year in a professional environment, this is a springboard to something else. You mentioned Calen Carr, who might be an MLS, lifer. I don't know where he will finish his career, but obviously he started with us at 14. He had 4 or 5 years with us, and the national team played a big part in his development as well in the U17 World Cup and his time in Florida. But then he, broke into our first team at a young age, played a huge role in our team, and then has moved on to another MLS club. And you mentioned Paxton Pomykal and Reggie Cannon and Jesus Ferreira and, Edwin Cerrillo and Brandon Cervania and a lot of these guys that are coming through our academy that are now playing important roles in our first team. And I don't know what the future holds for them. I think probably some of them will make a choice at some point that they really enjoy the lifestyle in the U.S. and they want to, continue to progress their career here domestically and still have a chance to play internationally with the U.S. And there may be others who really have that itch. They want to go abroad and overseas. And I think we want to help both of those types of players. Our ownership is really keen on making sure that we're providing pathways. And as we continue to have more and more kids break into our first team, one of the key elements is opportunity creates more opportunity. So if we've got these young talents coming through and we've got more young talents coming through, well, we can't, all of them can't play for FC Dallas indefinitely because they all need to be on the field. So yeah, we need to partner with international clubs. We need to find pathways to loan and sell players to other, competitions, so that we have a number of players that have come through all sort of fulfilling their dream.
You've partnered with one of the biggest clubs in the world, Bayern Munich. How have you seen that take shape? How did it begin? And where do you think that could go down the road?
Yeah, so a lot of these international partnerships turn out to be a branding exercise. And for us, it wasn't really interesting. I mean, we have a number of clubs that approach us, annually for that opportunity. And and to be fair, we would have some reciprocal interest in that from a branding perspective, but that was not the case with Bayern Munich. We wanted it to be a real relationship and one where there was real opportunity. They've been very open. I've been to Munich twice. I was in Munich twice in the last year. We took our under and I'll explain a little bit more, but we took our under 15s to the Bayern Munich Adidas Campus Cup in August and played against Dinamo Zagreb and Inter Milan and Bayern Munich and top clubs from top international clubs, and we ended up winning that tournament. In the final, we got to the final and won in penalties, and it was a great experience for our 2005 category, which we've got a lot of kids in the U.S. national team, and it's a pretty promising age group. But more than that, it was a really great experience for those kids to be exposed to high level football, and probably in a really important time in their development. Kids are kids. I mean, there's talent everywhere. If a kid in Dallas adapts and is able to go to Bayern Munich and do well, who knows? He could end up playing in their first team, or it could be a launch pad for him to do something else, or it could just be an experience for him to come back and bring back to Dallas and be better for it.
When I see the access and opportunity that these young guys have in your academy and across MLS, it really blows my mind because, when I came into MLS as a rookie in 2006, I'll date myself there. There were no academies. They just didn't even exist. So to see the types of players that we're now producing, you guys being near the head of the list is really been incredible for me. And I know that Audi is investing in MLS Academy systems in a big way through its Goals Drive Progress initiative. How has that played a big role in FC Dallas and the way you guys do things?
So for us, we've always been sort of a on-field teaching, real-time club. A lot of interaction with player and coach, a lot of competition. That competition breeds, I think, more success and more development. And one area where we were a little bit short was technology. We were really interested in looking to see what would meet a real need of ours. And we felt like that capturing more video and being able to pass that video onto our players and coaches would really give us a huge advantage. And it was something that we weren't doing a lot of. I'd say it's been really positive so far because we've been able to take a lot of that footage and put it more into our players' IDP plans. So as we're evaluating them during the week based on their weekend performance, we can then work with them a certain way and show them that footage literally in real time because we have iPads on the field with the players. This technology will really help us accelerate our current player pool and maybe take us to the next level. And of course, I'm sort of an old guy, so technology is sort of foreign to me. I've been the slowest learner in the process, but I think we've got a lot of coaches that are really invested in it now. So we're looking forward to see where it takes us. To have the tool available and be there literally at any time without us having to fly a drone or having us have to, raise a iPod or have a cameraman for that matter. Or able to clip things out is much, much easier. So this fund that Audi's provided us has really given us, I think, a leg up in terms of what we're trying to do.
Well, it's been awesome to get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of the FC Dallas way. So, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time and hoping that you get to return safely back to the field sometime soon.
Thank you, Calen. Enjoyed being on the call.